The first time Alessandro Moretti saw Elena Russo, she was standing in the rain outside a tiny neighborhood bakery with a broken umbrella, trying to comfort an old woman whose groceries had scattered across the flooded street. Luxury cars rushed past without slowing down, expensive suits ignored the scene, and strangers looked away as if kindness had become a forgotten language. Yet Elena knelt in the cold water without hesitation, gathering oranges one by one, smiling at the frightened woman as though nothing else in the world mattered. Watching from the back seat of his armored black limousine, Alessandro, known across Europe as the untouchable Mafia boss of the Moretti syndicate, felt something unfamiliar. He had built an empire through discipline, fear, and absolute control. Politicians respected him, enemies feared him, and billionaires sought his approval. But the sight of a woman helping someone who had absolutely nothing to offer in return disturbed the walls he had spent decades building around his heart. He quietly instructed his driver to learn everything about her, never imagining that the gentle stranger outside a bakery would one day become the only person capable of changing his destiny. Elena had no idea that her simple act of kindness had caught the attention of one of the world's most powerful men. She lived alone in a modest apartment, worked 2 jobs to pay off the medical debts left by her late mother, and believed that dignity mattered more than wealth. When she received an invitation to interview as the executive assistant for the prestigious Moretti Group, she assumed it was a mistake. She nearly threw the letter away, convinced that someone with her ordinary background could never belong inside the towering glass headquarters of such a legendary corporation. Yet desperation forced her to attend. Hundreds of applicants arrived wearing designer clothes and carrying impressive resumes, but Alessandro rejected every single one before Elena even entered the room. The moment she walked in, she apologized for arriving 30 seconds late because she had stopped to help an injured delivery driver outside. Instead of being annoyed, Alessandro stared at her in silence. She hadn't even realized she had unknowingly repeated the same kindness that first caught his attention months earlier. Against everyone's expectations, he hired her immediately. From the very beginning, Elena refused to be intimidated by him. Every employee trembled whenever Alessandro entered the office, but Elena simply greeted him with a calm smile and reminded him to eat lunch whenever he buried himself in endless meetings. She argued when he skipped medical checkups, criticized him whenever he worked until sunrise, and even dared to tell him that money meant nothing if he had no one to share his life with. His bodyguards watched these conversations in complete disbelief, expecting her to be fired within minutes. Instead, Alessandro would quietly hide a smile after she left the room. No one understood why the ruthless Mafia boss tolerated behavior that would have cost anyone else their job. Only he knew the answer. Elena made him feel human again. Months turned into years, and rumors spread throughout the organization. Some believed Elena secretly controlled Alessandro. Others whispered that she possessed dangerous secrets about him. The truth was far simpler and far more painful. Alessandro had fallen deeply in love with the woman who had never once asked him for power, wealth, or status. Yet he buried those feelings beneath endless business meetings and silent glances because his world was soaked in blood and betrayal. Loving someone meant exposing them to danger, and he had already lost too many people he cared about. He convinced himself that keeping his distance was the greatest act of love he could offer. Then everything changed in a single afternoon. At an extravagant charity gala attended by world leaders, celebrities, and billionaires, Alessandro publicly announced his engagement to Bianca De Luca, the daughter of another powerful Mafia family. Cameras flashed like lightning while applause echoed through the magnificent ballroom. Newspapers immediately celebrated the engagement as the alliance that would reshape organized crime across Europe. Bianca smiled proudly beside him, displaying a diamond ring worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Across the room, Elena stood perfectly still with a folder in her trembling hands. She forced herself to clap with everyone else, but inside, her heart quietly shattered. She had spent years convincing herself that her growing feelings for Alessandro were impossible, yet hearing the announcement felt like losing a future she had never dared to imagine. That night, Elena cried alone in her apartment for the first time since her mother's funeral. By sunrise, she had made the hardest decision of her life. She typed a resignation letter, thanked Alessandro for every opportunity he had given her, and promised to finish all pending projects before leaving permanently. She believed disappearing was the only way to protect her heart. The following morning, the atmosphere inside Moretti headquarters felt strangely tense. Alessandro arrived expecting another ordinary workday, but instead found a white envelope resting neatly on his desk. He opened it casually, then froze. His face lost all color as he read the words. Effective immediately, I resign from my position. For nearly an entire minute, the most feared man in Europe stood completely motionless. Then the office windows shook. He slammed both hands onto his desk so hard that crystal glasses shattered across the floor. "Where is Elena?" he demanded. No one answered. His security chief nervously whispered, "Sir, she packed her office an hour ago." Alessandro stormed through the building, ignoring terrified executives who scattered out of his path. Elevators were too slow, so he ran down 3 flights of stairs himself. Employees had never seen him lose control before. Outside the building, Elena stood beside a waiting taxi, holding a single suitcase and wiping away silent tears before climbing inside. "Miss Russo," the driver asked softly, "Airport?" She nodded. The taxi had barely moved a few feet when 6 black armored SUVs suddenly surrounded it from every direction. The driver slammed on the brakes. Doors opened in perfect synchronization. Dozens of suited bodyguards stepped out. And then Alessandro himself walked forward. He opened the taxi door, looked directly into Elena's tear-filled eyes, and spoke in a voice that was calm enough to terrify everyone present. "You're not leaving." Elena gathered every ounce of courage she had left. "I already resigned." His jaw tightened. "I never accepted it. You don't own my life." For the first time in years, Alessandro's eyes revealed genuine pain instead of authority. "I know," he whispered. "But if you walk away today, I'll lose the only person who ever reminded me that I was still capable of being human." Elena stared at him in stunned silence. Before she could answer, a deafening explosion echoed across the street. The ground trembled. Glass shattered. One of Alessandro's armored vehicles erupted into flames. Hidden snipers had been waiting for exactly this moment. And suddenly, Elena realized something horrifying. She hadn't resigned from an ordinary company. She had just become the primary target in a mafia war. The explosion ripped through the morning air, sending burning metal across the street as terrified pedestrians ran for cover. Alessandro reacted without hesitation. He grabbed Elena, shielding her with his own body as bullets shattered the taxi windows. His security team formed a protective circle around them, returning fire while smoke swallowed the entrance to the Moretti headquarters. Elena's hands trembled uncontrollably. She had never witnessed violence before, and in that terrifying moment she finally understood why Alessandro had always kept an invisible wall between them. Every person close to him became a target. Within minutes, they were rushed into an underground safe house hidden beneath one of the Moretti family's oldest estates. Doctors treated a small cut on Elena's forehead while Alessandro refused medical attention despite blood running down his arm. He never took his eyes off her. When the doctor finally left, silence filled the room. Elena looked at him with tears in her eyes and whispered, "You lied to me. You said your business was dangerous, but you never told me people wanted to kill you." Alessandro lowered his head. "Because I wanted you to have one normal life, even if I couldn't be part of it." The attack had not been random. Intelligence reports confirmed that the engagement with Bianca had been nothing more than a carefully planned political alliance to prevent a war between rival mafia families. Alessandro had never loved Bianca, and Bianca knew it. Their engagement existed only to protect thousands of innocent employees and families caught between two criminal empires. But someone within the organization had betrayed them, believing Elena was Alessandro's greatest weakness. By forcing her to leave, they hoped Alessandro would be distracted long enough to destroy him. That night, Elena accidentally overheard a conversation between Alessandro and his oldest advisor. "Cancel the wedding," the old man insisted. "The alliance is broken anyway." Alessandro stared out the window. "If I cancel it now, another war begins." "And if you don't?" the advisor asked quietly. Alessandro answered without turning around. "Then I'll lose the woman I love." Those words shattered every misunderstanding Elena had carried for years. The next morning she confronted him. "Why didn't you tell me?" Alessandro smiled sadly. "Because love has never protected anyone in my world. It only paints a target on their back." Elena stepped closer. "Then let me decide whether I'm willing to take that risk." For the first time in years, the feared mafia boss couldn't find a single word to say. Before either of them could speak again, alarms echoed through the estate. The enemy had discovered the safe house. Dozens of armed mercenaries surrounded the property, determined to capture Elena alive. Alessandro ordered everyone to escape through secret tunnels while he stayed behind to delay the attackers. Elena refused. "I'm not leaving without you." He looked at her with desperate eyes. "If they catch you, they'll never stop using you against me." She grabbed his hand tightly. "Then stop fighting alone." Together they escaped through underground passages leading to an abandoned cathedral overlooking the sea. But betrayal waited even there. Bianca appeared with several armed men. Elena expected jealousy and hatred, but Bianca slowly lowered her weapon. "I never wanted this marriage," Bianca confessed. "My father forced me into it. The man hunting you murdered my brother too. He's using both families to build his own empire." For the first time, the two women stood on the same side. Bianca secretly revealed the traitor's identity, a trusted executive who had worked beside Alessandro for 15 years. The man had secretly sold information to rival syndicates, orchestrating the engagement, the attacks, and every betrayal to seize control of both criminal empires. The final confrontation took place inside the grand hall where Alessandro had announced his engagement weeks earlier. This time there were no cameras, no applause, only armed guards and years of hidden lies. The traitor laughed as he pointed a gun toward Elena. "You built an empire," he sneered, "but all it took to destroy you was one woman." Alessandro slowly stepped in front of Elena. "No," he replied calmly. "It took one woman, to remind me there was a better life worth fighting for." A fierce battle erupted. Guards clashed throughout the hall while the traitor attempted to escape. Instead of chasing him with rage, Alessandro cornered him without firing a single shot. Police units, secretly contacted weeks earlier as part of Alessandro's plan to dismantle the criminal network forever, stormed the building and arrested every surviving conspirator. News spread across the world. The feared Moretti syndicate voluntarily surrendered its illegal operations, handing over hidden evidence that exposed corruption reaching the highest levels of power. Newspapers called it the greatest collapse of organized crime in modern history. Months later, the luxurious headquarters no longer belonged to a mafia empire. It had become the headquarters of the Moretti Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting orphan children, struggling families, and victims of organized crime. Former bodyguards became security officers protecting charities instead of criminals. Former warehouses became schools and hospitals. On a warm spring morning, Elena walked through the front doors carrying the same old leather notebook she had used as Alessandro's assistant years earlier. But this time, there were flowers instead of armed guards, laughter instead of fear, and children running through the gardens outside. Alessandro was waiting for her beneath the sunlight that poured through the glass ceiling. He knelt on one knee. "There was once a day I stopped you from leaving," he said with a gentle smile. "Today I'm asking something very different." He opened a small velvet box. "Will you stay, for the rest of our lives?" With tears streaming down her face, Elena whispered the answer she had carried silently in her heart for years. "Yes." The employees erupted into applause. Even Bianca smiled before quietly walking away to begin a new life of her own. As church bells echoed across the city, Alessandro realized that the greatest victory of his life had never been winning wars, building an empire, or becoming the most feared man in Europe. His greatest victory was earning the trust of the woman who taught him that true strength is measured not by the fear you inspire, but by the hope you leave behind. Years later, people no longer remembered Alessandro Moretti as the ruthless mafia boss whose name once terrified entire cities. They remembered him as the man who dismantled his own empire to build a future where children could dream without fear. And whenever someone asked Elena why she had chosen to stay with a man whose past was filled with darkness, she would simply smile and answer, because even the strongest walls can hide the kindest heart, and sometimes, one act of love is powerful enough to change an entire destiny.